IELTS Agree Disagree essay. In this video we're going to be having a look at the first of 6 types of essays that I'm going to be introducing to you, and that's the essays that can be responded to with a totally agree or totally disagree response. I'm 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. I've been an examiner in Taipei City and also Adelaide, Australia. I've graded over 10,000 essays. I think this gives me a lot of experience and insights into the kinds of difficulties that students have. I've also written books on IELTS writing, which you can find on Amazon.com and also my website IELTSanswers.com. In today's essay, I want to teach you how to identify an agree-disagree essay, how to plan it, how to structure your essay. I'm also going to give you a sample answer for you to review, and you are able to download a PDF for this type of essay in the details below this video. Now, this is one of 6 types of structures that I'm going to be teaching you on YouTube, and all 6 structures are available in the PDF that I've placed at the bottom of this video. The purpose of this video is to go into a bit more depth than I do in the PDF and explain in detail some of the important aspects of structuring and responding to this type of question. Now, the other types I'm going to make videos for. Also subscribe to me so that you'll see those videos. So I've identified different types of questions that signal opinion essay, and when we think about an opinion essay, that's an essay where you're required to give your opinion and nothing else. And so all these topics that you can see on the screen now are opinion essays. Now, the ones in blue, you can give a response of totally agree or totally disagree. You can just cover one side. You don't need to cover both sides. However, the ones in green I feel are better responded to by covering both sides of the topic. I'm going to make a separate video to deal with that. So it's just the blue ones that we're going to be dealing with today. What is your opinion? Do you agree or disagree? To what extent do you agree or disagree? Now we have to say how much we agree or disagree. Or even possibly the last one, do you think it is a positive or negative development? That one will be slightly different. We won't be agreeing or disagreeing. We're going to be stating whether we think something is positive or negative. But essentially the structure would be the same for all 4 types of questions. So for instance, if we're asked what is your opinion, we can have the same response as these other types. Our opinion could be that we totally agree or we totally disagree. For instance, if it was a topic like whether people should wear masks in times of a global pandemic, you could totally agree and say that it's a great idea because it can offer you some protection and it can offer others protection. Or you might totally disagree. You might say that they don't work and they're not very practical. So let's have a look at a sample task. So our instructions are, and I think it's useful when looking at a task to think about a topic and question as being 2 separate parts. So first we've got the topic. Many people believe working from home is better than going to an office. And then the question, to what extent do you agree or disagree? Now, I suggest that you either totally agree or totally disagree, and I'll give you 3 quick reasons why. First of all, it'll help keep the essay short. One of the challenges in the test is that you have to finish both tasks in 1 hour, and if you can keep your essay a bit shorter, that's going to help you to manage your time and make sure that you can finish. I also think it's a lot easier than having a somewhat opinion, like somewhat agree or somewhat disagree. When we want to write that sort of essay, we need a concession, and it's quite tricky to do it safely and correctly. I'm going to cover that sort of response at the end of the video, and I think at that point you might understand that it's actually harder than you thought to write that type of essay well. By keeping the main ideas limited to 2, it's also going to allow you to have larger body paragraphs, which will enable you to show the examiner your ability to develop ideas, which is critical to getting a high score of 7 and above for task response. A fourth reason that I just thought of is that you'll have more time to proofread your essay, and that's going to be a good thing, because that means you're going to be more likely to catch some of your mistakes with spelling, vocabulary and grammar, thereby lifting your score for those, and again decreasing the risk that you have a whole lot of mistakes in your essay. Now, I always recommend to students that you make some sort of a plan before you start writing, and if you do make a plan, it will actually save you time, because you do all your thinking together rather than start writing and having to stop and think what to write next. And funny enough, the 2 ideas that I've got for this topic about working from home are that 1, it saves time, and 2, that it leads to higher productivity. You're going to see how I develop these soon in the essay that I'm writing. As with all our essays, we're going to have 3 main parts. We're going to have an introduction, body and conclusion. I'll go through each one of these separately now. We want to do 2 things in our introduction. First, we want to accurately paraphrase the topic. This shows the examiner that you understand the topic and also talent with vocabulary. Paraphrasing is one of the indicators of band 7 and above. So the better you can paraphrase, the higher the score you can get. This is the area that the examiner is going to be really looking for it as well, and this is because some students will sometimes just copy the instructions, and of course that makes a terrible first impression. The other thing we want to do in our introduction is tell the reader what the essay is about. Essentially, we're going to be telling the reader what our opinion is right there in the introduction before we move on into the essay. So now on your screen you can see how I've paraphrased the instructions. The first sentence paraphrases the topic. Many people prefer working from their house or apartment instead of an office. Then I tell the reader my opinion and the reasons why. I totally agree that it is better to work from home because it saves time and increases productivity. You'll see that I've included my opinion, totally agree, and also the 2 reasons for it: saves time and increases productivity. I'd just like to highlight here that out of all the 6 essays that I'm going to teach you, this is the only one where I put the specific points from the body of the essay into the introduction. With other types, I just introduce what the essay is about without actually putting the specific points in. Now, the reason why I do it with this one, I could leave them out and just have the sentence, I totally agree that it is better to work from home. However, I do feel that it adds something to the introduction, And with this particular type of task, we have the luxury of being able to write a bit more because the body of the essay is not going to be too lengthy, because we only have two main ideas in it, whereas other types of essays are going to have three or even four main ideas. In some way, I feel if you get this type of question, you're actually kind of lucky, especially if you don't need a particularly high score. If you only need 6 or 7, this is a great essay to get, because only needing to include the two main ideas means that you don't need to write an overly long essay. Make sure you write 250 words though, otherwise you'll get -1 off your score for task response. Now let's move on to the body paragraphs, and the body paragraphs need to do three main things for all essay types. We need a topic sentence, then we want to develop the main idea of our topic sentence, and we can do this by explaining it or illustrating it with an example. These can occur in either order too, so sometimes you might have topic sentence, explanation, example. Other times you might have topic sentence, example, explanation. It really just depends on what it is you're trying to explain. If you had an essay, say, about how a person's genes or how they're born leads to success, we could give an example of Michael Phelps, the swimmer, also called the human dolphin, and how his arm span is wider than a normal person's, giving him an edge in the pool and showing how his success is largely due to nature rather than training or other aspects. Remember, you can refer to the PDF if you want to download it and read it. Here's my first body paragraph, and it starts with a topic sentence that introduces the main idea. Now, out of the 6 essays that I'm going to teach you, the first 2, both opinion essays, are structured this way, with just one main idea in the topic sentence. The purpose of the topic sentence is to tell the reader what the paragraph is about. So this topic sentence tells the reader my first reason why I agree that working from home is better, and that is that it saves time. Then I go on to explain it a bit. In particular, it eliminates the need for a daily commute to an office, which saves most people many hours per week. Then I use a personal example to support my opinion. Now, personal examples are encouraged in the task instructions. If you look carefully at the task instructions, the instructions clearly show that it's a good idea to give personal examples, because it says that you should use ideas from your own knowledge and experience. So, my personal example is as follows. For example, due to COVID lockdowns, I am now working from home and I save at least 10 hours each week that would otherwise be spent traveling. I also save time on dressing and grooming myself for work, as I can dress more casually when I work from home, unlike when I go to an office and need to put on a suit and tie. For my next body paragraph, I introduce the idea of higher productivity, and then I support it by explaining that there are fewer distractions than when we work in an office environment. And again, I give a personal example of how I started working from home and am able to focus on my work so much better due to avoiding distractions from colleagues asking me unnecessary questions. Now you're going to want to write the conclusion for your essay, start every conclusion with the two words "in conclusion." This is the best phrase. There are other ones. This is the best phrase because it can be used for all 6 types of essays that I'm going to teach you. And we want to do 3 things in our conclusion. We want to restate our opinion. Now, that might seem repetitive. Doesn't matter. That's just how we write essays. You've been asked for your opinion, and the first thing you should do is restate what it is. Then you want to summarize the reasons for your opinion. And then maybe if you're trying to get to band 8 and beyond, you might like to put some kind of final statement in your introduction. Let's have a closer look. So I start my concluding paragraph with the words "in conclusion," and then I paraphrase my opinion. Now, in the introduction I said I totally agree. Now I'm saying I completely believe. This is the same opinion, it's just I've paraphrased it, which is always a good idea. And you might like to memorize some of these phrases. Then I summarize the reasons and again paraphrase the way I've written them earlier a little bit. So remember my 2 ideas: saves time and higher levels of efficiency. Then it comes to the final statement. Now, you don't have to write this, but I think it's extremely helpful if you're trying to get to higher band scores. And what it is a final statement based on the summary that you wrote. Now, my summary was about saving time and higher levels of efficiency, so now my final statement is some kind of recommendation that therefore employers should try to offer their workers this option whenever possible, right? So it's a recommendation based on the summary that I wrote. I could write other ones too, something like therefore this mode of working should be embraced. They wouldn't be bad as well. So now on your screen you can see the complete essay, and you might like to just pause and have a read of that, or even better, you could download the PDF file that I mentioned and you could read this essay and also the other 5 types of essays. So there's a total of 6 essays that I'm presenting to you in the PDF, and these cover almost all of the questions you're likely to get in your test and are therefore an excellent way to prepare for your test. Now, I did mention earlier about concessions, and some of you might like to write them. I really don't advise it if you only need 6 or perhaps 7, but if you're trying to get to 8 or 9, it could be useful. So let's see what we need to do when we're giving a concession. So what I mean by a concession is, instead of being totally agree or totally disagree, it's going to be something like somewhat agree, which means that I agree more strongly than I disagree, but there's some sort of reason that I want to present as to why I don't totally agree. Now, in order to write these effectively, you really need to identify some kind of exception for the topic, some kind of person that you wouldn't agree with, or maybe some sort of situation in which you wouldn't agree with doing something. Let me give you an example to illustrate. So let's have a look at what might be a valid concession. Now, imagine that the topic is masks stop the spread of viruses, so many people argue that masks should be mandatory when there is a pandemic. Mandatory means kind of like everybody has to follow it, right? It's compulsory. Like it could be in the law, you might get a fine or something. And a pandemic is when we have a virus spread sort of everywhere. And then the question is, to what extent do you agree or disagree? Now, imagine that you want to somewhat agree, and so your first reason is it protects the wearer, and and you write a paragraph about how it protects the wearer, and then you write another paragraph how it protects other people from the wearer if the wearer has the virus, right? Let's imagine we want to have a concession. If I've written these paragraphs about agreeing because it protects the wearer and protects other people, can I then write a paragraph about how they're uncomfortable? Now, uncomfortable is a disadvantage, but remember, the essay is not about advantages and disadvantages. It's about whether you agree or disagree. And I think that if you now write a paragraph about masks being uncomfortable, that's contradicting what you've written already. You've written that you agree and that they protect the wearer, they protect other people. So for me, the fact that they're uncomfortable is just a disadvantage. And it's not a reason to disagree that they should be mandatory. The same about freedom of choice. Again, there's a contradiction. If I've written a paragraph about how I agree because they protect the wearer, they protect other people, now writing a paragraph about, so it'd be something like, however, people should have a freedom of choice. Well, if people should have freedom of choice, then that means you don't think they should be mandatory, and then you must totally disagree or somewhat disagree and have some kind of exception where freedom of choice shouldn't apply. For example, maybe a hospital where people are already critically ill, maybe you think they should be mandatory there, right? You've got to be really careful that you don't contradict yourself in the essay, and this happens a lot, and it's why I think this is a risky approach and requires a high degree of sophistication and a high level of language use that really normally only a band 8 or 9 would have. So if you're a band 6 and you're trying to write this kind of essay, it's extremely difficult, and you're opening up to a whole lot of risks that could simply be avoided by just taking the totally agree option instead. However, let me show you now how you could do it, how it would be okay to write a concession. So if we've got these paragraphs about it should be mandatory because it protects me and it protects other people, we could then have a paragraph about an exception where we don't think it should be mandatory, and that might be for people with respiratory issues, people who, if they put a mask on, might be compromised, might die. Maybe they shouldn't have to wear a mask. And another good example would be babies. They should be excluded from this mandatory requirement because they don't make masks small enough. And how are you going to keep a mask on a 6-month-old baby? Not to mention the danger that they might suffocate or something, as has happened. I'll give you another example of where I think it might be okay. If we take a new set of instructions, many people argue that admission to museums should be free. To what extent do you agree or disagree? Now let's say we somewhat disagree, and we'll have a couple of paragraphs, one about the need to pay costs and how admission fees can help with those, and then another paragraph about how admission fees can provide a source of funding for upgrading the museum, for upgrading exhibits, for buying new exhibitions. But then we might have a reason to agree, and here's some options. Maybe the underprivileged, such as students who don't have money, or the unemployed, should have the right to free admission because it's a kind of right to access culture, and otherwise we're making culture and the arts elitist, right? And we're ignoring those members of society. We're denying them the opportunity. Or we might agree that in certain situations it should be free, such as national days, national museums should be free. If we go back to my original essay about working from home, if I wanted to have a concession, so remember that I said that I agreed because it saves time and that productivity's higher when working from home. If I wanted to have a concession for that and change it into somewhat agree, I'd probably write a paragraph like you see on your screen. And basically my point doesn't contradict the two paragraphs about agreeing, because it's outlining a specific situation where I think it's better to work at the company, and that's expensive equipment. So you can see the paragraph. However, jobs that require expensive equipment are better conducted from a company's headquarters. This is because it will not be cost efficient to do this kind of job from home. For example, the research I conduct requires the use of a powerful microscope and can only be performed at work. Of course, this is not true, and I don't use a microscope, and that's totally fine when you write your essay. It's totally fine to use a personal example that isn't actually true. It's called telling stories. Alright, so I hope you found this video useful. Here's what I recommend you do now. I recommend that you download the PDF. You can download this PDF from below in the description. And what you can do is read the different types of essays. And what I've done is I have 6 different types of questions, and then 6 model answers. For each type of question there's a model answer. Then if you want to take things a step further, write an essay, read my sample, and then after my sample there's a homework task that you could write. And then you're welcome to use my writing correction service. What I do is I read your essay, I make corrections, and then I give it a score and give you feedback on how you can get a higher score for each of the 4 grading criteria: task response, cohesion and coherence, vocabulary, and grammar. This way you can be checking your understanding. You can read the model answer, then write a homework task to challenge yourself and see if you understood everything about the model answer and about this video if you're watching the video. And then finally you'll get your essay back from me, and you can learn a lot from the feedback. You can find out things that you didn't understand or things that you need to do better in order to increase your score. You can also ask me some follow-up questions by email, or even it's possible I can do a one-on-one lesson with you. And then this is an extremely powerful way for you to learn how to structure essays and respond to the task instructions. So make sure you get your PDF from the section below this video, and I'll also put details of my writing correction service in the details as well. Best of luck with your study. If you've got a goal for passing your test, stick with it, work hard. I know you're going to be successful. And don't forget to subscribe to me so that you will get notification as I release other types of essays in this series. Remember, there's 6 types of essays in total.